Hey Heeltoe followers, welcome to the Heeltoe YouTube channel. This is Marcus DiSabella and I'm actually recording this from my podcast desk. Yeah, if you weren't aware, we do have a podcast as well. It is published to YouTube and wherever you stream your podcast services as the Heeltoe Corner Club podcast. So make sure you check that out. The reason why I'm making this recording right now is because I, with Aiello, captured a whole bunch of content last weekend about wheel fitments on the Acura TLX Type S that we have. I bought a new set of wheels for it, so I thought it would be a really great opportunity to talk about the wheel fitment that we were coming from, the one that we're going through, and as well the specs of the factory wheels and what the impact of wheel spacers will have on there. So we highlighted the Titan7 wheels, the SSR GTX01s, and the OEM wheels with our Fastline Performance forged wheel spacers in 25 millimeter size. So we got imagery of all of those spacers and wheels together, all in the same car, all on the same day, and it was a really sunny day too, so that tiger eye pearl paint was just popping. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Heeltoe channel to get all kinds of great content, not just this wheel spacer video, but also the podcast that I'm working on alongside our YouTube channel. Enjoy! Okay, the first thing I want to clear the air with on TLX Type S wheels is the difference between the Y-spoke lightweight wheel and the factory multi-spoke wheel. They have the same specs. They're 20 by 9 inch wheels and they're both 55 offset, but there is one important difference when it comes to wheel spacers, how you're going to fit spacers on these wheels. All right, now check out the hub area of these wheels. The multi-spoke wheels have shallow pockets in between the lug nuts, and these casting marks come proud of those pockets just a little bit. And that is going to limit the size of wheel spacer that you can use without interference. We found that a 20 millimeter spacer is going to actually contact some of those casting marks, and that will create an interference that makes it so the wheel can't bolt on flush. So if you're going to use 20 millimeter spacers on here, you can. You just have to grind down these casting marks, and then it'll fit just fine. If you have Y-spoke wheels, it's not a concern. And the reason why is because it's got much deeper pockets here, and they can accept the 20 millimeter spacer just fine. The studs from the factory car will nest in here without any interference at all. These hub pockets are one of the reasons why these wheels are considered lightweight wheels, even though they're not really light at all. They're still pretty heavy, but this pocket is the difference in what makes one wheel spacer fit and another one not. All right, so a final comment here. If this interference is giving you any kind of heartburn, just understand that if you really want a 20 millimeter spacer, there's no harm at all in grinding these pockets down. But if you do go with a 25 millimeter spacer, you're not gonna have any interference whatsoever. It's gonna fit and work great. And actually, let's go ahead and show you that on the car. Here's a factory multi-spoke wheel. It's a little dirty from sitting in my backyard for a while since I've got these other cool wheels to play with, but I did want to show you how the Fastline Performance 25 millimeter spacers will change the look of even a factory wheel. Now remember, this wheel is the same spec as the Y-spoke lightweight wheel, and that's also the same wheel that comes on the PMC2. It's a 9-inch wide wheel with a 55 millimeter offset, and we're using a 25 millimeter Fastline spacer on here, and what that's going to do is move it to effectively a 30 millimeter offset. So if you're looking at wheels 9-inch wide, 30 offset, this is basically the look that you're going to get. I'm going to show you some detailed shots of how this looks against the fender so that you can get a good idea of how they're going to look on your car. Okay, so you can clearly see, and you have a factory car, so you know what that looks like, that this tire is notably out farther than the factory one is. The tire does come a little bit closer to the fender, but again, as you come over the top, you can see that the tire does sort of disappear behind the fender, and from the front, it's not bulging out or anything like that, but it is a really generous fit here. This is the reason why 25mm spacers are really the favored spacer size for this car. 27mm spacers are available as well from H&R, but if you can imagine just what 2 extra millimeters would do here, it's not a lot of spacing, but it does get to be a little bit much at a certain point. You do see that the tire is coming out past the body a little bit more than it would normally, and so rock chips are going to be a little bit of a concern there, but again, the more aggressive look is probably well worth it for most of us. Let's take a look at the back here. The back is sort of similar to the front, and you can find that the tire does come out quite a bit farther than the original one does. 25mm spacer is quite a bit, but it still fits inside the fender. There won't be any rubbing with this fitment at all. So keep in mind that even though that this is aggressive looking, it actually looks really great on the car, really complements the look. There really isn't any drawback to running spacers like this. Sometimes people talk about there being extra wear and tear on the suspension components or the wheel hubs, and that's just not true. I have a whole video talking about wheel spacers on TLXs and wheel spacers in general. I'll put links to those down below, as well as links to these Fastline spacers in case you'd like to get some on your own. One of the videos in particular to pay attention to talks about myths and speccing out these parts. So don't believe any of the negative commentary that you've heard without watching that video first. Okay, here we are checking out a Titan7 wheel. It's 10 inches wide, it's got a 37mm offset. And if you want to have this kind of a fitment with a factory wheel, what kind of offset spacer would you need? How thick would that need to be? Well, obviously it would have to make up for the offset difference. 55mm offset on a factory wheel coming down to a 37mm offset is a 13mm change. Now, if you put a 13mm spacer on a factory wheel, it's going to come out, but it's not going to come out this much. And the reason why is because this wheel is wider than a factory one by 1 whole inch. Now, an extra ½ an inch on the outside of this wheel accounts for about 12.7mm of change. So we take the 13mm change in wheel offset, add the 12.7 to it, right, and you come up with 25.7mm change on a factory wheel to get the same basic fitment here. Now, of course, they don't make spacers in that size. They make a 25mm from Fastline for this car and a 27mm from H&R. So to get a factory wheel in about this spot, you're going to be somewhere in between, right? A lot of people favor the 25mm just because it's on the slightly more conservative side of that total offset change. So watch this clip and we'll show you the detail of how this wheel fits against the fender. So effectively, this wheel compared to a factory wheel is going to be 55 minus 12 for the offset change. So effectively, this wheel compared to a factory one is going to be the 55mm offset minus the 13 because it's a 37 offset wheel minus 12.5 again, which makes it because of the extra width. So because of the 13 and another, we'll just call it another 13, 26, this is about equivalent to what the factory wheel with a 26 or 27mm spacer is going to look like. So think like that when you're looking at how this fitment goes, and understand that H&R does have a 27mm spacer, but if you're looking to go just a little in from there, the 25 is maybe a little safer. Okay, so in the front here you can see that it fills out the fender really pretty well. Then the tire does not really come past the fender. I mean, as you kind of come in like this, you can see the tire is kind of coming out, but as soon as you get past the fender, the tire disappears. And from the top, if we're looking directly down from the top, see the tire does not come proud of the fender. It just doesn't. So sometimes the visual is a little bit confusing. Like right here, it looks like it bulges out a little bit, but right above, it doesn't. Now this car is lowered with TEIN springs. From the rear, you get a really good sense that the tire does come out quite a bit because the body of the car comes in a little bit like that. And you can see that there is some road damage here from the extra exposure. You know, that's just sort of one of the pain points that comes along with more aggressive fitting wheels and tires. Okay, now let's come back to the back and see how this fitment looks from the back. The front does have a little bit more forgiveness than the rear does, but even still, you can see that as you come over the top of the fender, the tire is inside the fender. How square the tire sidewall is going to play a factor here, but you can see that even though it's bumping right out here, it's a very flush fitment. There's a little bit less showing from behind here. It's a very aggressive looking fitment, and from the rear, this car does have a very aggressive look. And so if you want to have this sort of look with a factory wheel, you should definitely go with a 27mm spacer, and you'd be looking pretty good. We just got these brand new SSR GTX01s mounted onto the car, and that's a change from the Titan7 wheels that we had before. The adjustment in specs is the Titan7 was 19 by 10. These are 19 by 9.5, so they're a little bit narrower. Also, these are 38mm offset versus 37. So those specs mean that this tire is going to be just a little more inside the fender. But if you're going to put that in terms of an OEM wheel and where that would sit and what kind of spacer you would need to achieve this look, let's crunch those numbers. An OEM wheel has a 55 offset. This one has a 38. That's a change of 12mm. But also this wheel is wider than a factory wheel by 1/2 inch. 1/4 inch of change on the outside means about a 6.3mm shift in the offset towards the outside. So if we take the 12mm change in offset plus the 6 and change millimeter offset from the width, we come up with 18 plus about millimeter change. So that means that there aren't going to be any wheel spacers that you can get for OEM wheels that will achieve this look. But if you are looking for something a little bit more conservative like this is, you're probably going to be looking at a 20mm spacer. And again, if you have the multi-spoke wheels, there will be a little bit of adjustment needed to the backside of that hub to make the clearance to fit the 20mm spacers, and it's totally doable. But if you do have the Y-spoke performance lightweight wheels, then you won't have to do any modifications at all, and a 20mm spacer might actually be the look that you're going for. Okay, so here's the SSR wheel up close and personal. As we go around here, you can see that the tire does fill out the fender well really pretty well, but it disappears just a little bit sooner than just a slightly more aggressive offset setup is going to do. Now, these tires are slightly narrower than the ones on the Titan7, but they're quite a bit larger than the ones on the OEM wheels. These tires are 275 40/19, but also look at how square they look. These tires actually have a really thick width to them. Not every tire, even though it's the same exact size on the sidewall, is going to present the same on the car. And I have a feeling that these tires are actually a bit wider than the numbers would indicate. So they got a really nice meaty fitment here. I mean, look at how thick the rim spacer is here. It's like almost a 1/2 inch. So keep in mind that even though this doesn't necessarily look more conservative, it definitely is. And moving to the back, we kind of see the same thing again. The meaty tire really fills out the fender well, but it doesn't come past the body. It's even a little bit more conservative than the Titan7 setup is, but again, it doesn't really look that way because the tire is so fat. The wheel is actually quite a bit farther inside than the Titan7 wheel is. If you look at those Titan7 wheels with the tire fitment, the tire kind of curves in a little bit more at the top, so that is going to make a change to your overall fender look as well. All right, we tried a bunch of different sets of wheels on the TLX to try to give you a really good idea of how different wheel fitments are going to work on this car and how OEM wheels will work with different spacers. I know there's a lot of talk online about this, and I thought it would be really good to just make one video that explained it all to you. And so if you have any other wheel spec questions, or you're not really sure about something I've said here, please leave a comment below and make sure you subscribe to the channel as well, dude. I do all kinds of great videos like this that just try to help explain how things work on the car, and that's the Heeltoe way. All the parts that you've seen are available for purchase on the Heeltoe website as well, so always shop Heeltoe Automotive. make sure that you know that we are in your corner. Another thing I have to say is that this car is equipped with TEIN springs. There are also Swift and Eibach options available, as well as BC Racing coilovers that all have a little bit of different height capability. But with the TEIN springs, we did the test here today. They're a little bit more of the conservative side of springs. We'll do another video in the future comparing springs as well, just like we've compared wheel specs here. Have a great day.